All right, so welcome back from our very short break here. Our next speaker is also a graduate of Daoist Traditions College in Asheville, North Carolina. And I heard this great episode of Geological, the podcast, earlier this year. Specifically, the speaker was talking about moving from a background in mathematics towards a future in Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and Taoism. A few of these things that he spoke about in the podcast piqued my interest. Firstly, his strength in an area that for me is a bit of a weakness in mathematics. Next, his understandings of numbers and numerology, and his knowledge of the Wu Yun Liu Qi, which is uncommonly known, I find, in the Western Chinese medical community, even though it is an important and emphasized part of our classics. And that's what his talk will elucidate on today. These teachings around how cosmic forces, their numerical laws and rhythms impact our psyche and our emotions. The other thing from his talk that really gave me an aha moment was his talk about sacred geometry, specifically a moment where he mentioned that three-dimensional manifestation of a taiji or yin-yang symbol is actually a torus. A torus where we're kind of moving in this donut-shaped pattern. I'm not going to be able to explain that. Maybe he can. But I've experienced this with certain practices and meditations where that's a truth that's kind of been circulating around, and I never would have had the ability to kind of describe it in a way that actually connected it to this sacred symbol. And so it's one of those things where you find somebody who can explain experiences that you've had in some of the brighter moments of meditation, and can actually like connect it back to some of these ancient symbols and principles and everything like that. And that makes a teacher really special and really interesting to invite to our conference. So I'm really happy that we have today Rory Hiltbrand, who practices acupuncture and Chinese medicine at Four Mountains Clinic in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. And he practices according to the Dohan. You'll tell me how to pronounce that, Korean lineage of Taoism. And he has an impressive resume in respect to his previous work in mathematics and physics, and he's even cornered UFC fights as an acupuncturist in recent times. Let's give a warm, muted, but warm welcome to Rory Hiltbrand. Rory, tell us what we need to know about Taoist numerology and the Wu Yun Liu Qi.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam. Can you hear me clearly? All right. Great. So, yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me to this event. And yeah, let's have some fun talking about Taoist numerology. I'll share my screen here. Okay. All right. Can you all see the slides? All right. So before we get started, I wanted to touch on the title of this conference, which is Taoist Skills for the Modern World. And I don't want people to have the concept that Taoism is just something ancient that needs to be retrofitted for our modern times. It's not just this ancient practice, although it has ancient roots. Taoism itself is really timeless. So keep that understanding. It's not a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's right now at the very center of your being. It's not some distant force in some dimension away from you. It's your very being. Taoism is the center of yourself. I remember one time I'll introduce, I studied with the Dohan clan, Korean lineage, under Grandmaster Sung Baek. And he was treating a patient. It's a medical lineage. He was treating a patient. And at the end, he said, and if you have this pain, you can take 2 Advil. And the patient looked at him and was floored, like 2 Advil. I'm trying to be a Taoist here. You're not going to give me like an herb for this. And he said, why be a Taoist from 2000 years ago? To be a Taoist, all that's really required is you be completely right now. And he smacked the table. And it was a very powerful moment for me. All right. So may the force be with you. All right. Taoist numerology for everyday life. So this is a quote from the Nei Jing Su Wen. It's one of the primary texts for not just Chinese medicine, but Taoism. All of these, or many of these classics, are 81 chapters. So it points to this structure, like this hidden code that this numerology and cosmology is encoded in all of these texts. Sorry, a little water. So the ancient people knew the proper way to live. They followed the pattern of yin and yang, which is the regular pattern of heaven and earth. They managed to apply the numerical symbols, which are the great principles of human life. So I think what a lot of Chinese medicine practitioners do, they learn these concepts of yin and yang, or even martial arts people, yin and yang, 5 elements, 6 qi, maybe, 11, 17, 64. There's all kinds of numerics. 22, 10, 12. And, 8, of course, 9, all of them. So there's a lot. So they learn these concepts and they just keep it in the box of Chinese medicine or whatever they're practicing. But in the classics, they talk about this. These are the great principles of human life. So really, these understandings are like the source code of reality. And so applied, it becomes Chinese medicine. Applied, it becomes Tai Chi. Applied, it becomes Feng Shui. Applied, it becomes all of life. The modern world itself is just one manifestation of the Tao. So the Tao really hold that concept. The Tao is like what this is all coming from and manifesting as all philosophies and religions, including atheism. So that's have that idea. So when we have these numerical calculations about the universe, when we repeat certain functions in mathematics, it's called iterating. And when you iterate functions, what you get is something called a fractal. So this emerged the whole field of chaos theory. So when you have a fractal, you have a repeating pattern at different scales. And that's where the concept of the microcosm to the macrocosm comes up. So basically, our own body is the same pattern of this cosmology of the universe. And so we study as Taoists within our clan, the concept is you study this small pattern, and by knowing the small, you know the large, by knowing the near, you know the far, et cetera, et cetera. And another quote that I really love, just to tie it to, modern life, and you can see there's so many physicists during the quantum revolution. I used to study physics, and that's what actually brought me to Chinese medicine, is I found out that all of these physicists were really into Eastern philosophy. So here's one of the godfathers of quantum mechanics, Max Planck. He said, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force is the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter. I love that quote, obviously. All right. So there'll be a lot of physics tied in here. I really like it. Our agenda for today, I'm going to give some brief introductions. And then we're going to, as Sam said, we'll talk about some of the fundamentals of Taoist numerology, geometry, cosmology. And then we will apply this to Jiu-Jitsu, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. And it'll be a big change of gears, but it's really fun. And if you don't have much grappling background, some of these things may be lost on you. But it'll be really interesting. I think we'll still get some of the ideas across. So the Do-Han clan is a Korean Daoist lineage under the 73rd Grandmaster Sung Baek. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I have a degree in mathematical economics. And I say that because what you understand things in terms of what's already understood. So I'm so steeped in this mathematical background that that's how I understand it. And that's kind of the language I speak. And I also think that it's good to try and talk in the context of the times and kind of bridge these concepts together. So some of these may be a little into the weeds when I talk about math, but if you're like me, you'll find some of these things really interesting. Okay, to start, we're going to start with the concept of cosmic thunder and the multidimensional structure of reality. So when I was studying with Master Sung, he drew this image, seems very simple, and he taps it and he goes, as a Taoist, this is something that you need to understand thoroughly at all times. And that is that we're living in this multidimensional structure, conscious structure of reality. So each of these little infinity loops, like Mobius bands, these are different planes of reality and existence. And you can think about even in your own life, like your physical structure is one dimension. We're in this three-dimensional space. We have a temporal dimension. And we also have these emotions of like, which is a whole other dimension of our life, our emotional life, our intellectual life, our spiritual life, and our divinity, and so on. There's deities, all of this is all woven together into one holographic experience of reality. Now, the force, this central line, which connects all of them together at all times, this is the concept of cosmic thunder, which is very important to our Taoist clan. So it shows up everywhere in Sanskrit. It's Vajra. In Tibetan, it's written as Dorje. And I mean, if you even look at, a lot of polytheistic religions, usually within the hierarchy, the thunder gods at the top. So you have like Indra or Zeus and so on and so forth. Now, we have infinite many levels of dimensions that you can experience. So between 0 and infinity, you can go up and up and up. But the structure always repeats every 7. So there's groups of 7 at each level. And there's specific geometric purposes for why this occurs, but that's beyond the scope of the time that we have today. So again, not just like each plane, like our human experience, it's also our own physical structure. So like 7 and 1, we have Hui Yin, and at our root, we have Ba Hui, our crown, at 7. And then we have our root at Hui Yin beneath. So these are like basically like our chakric dimensional aspects. In Chinese medicine, first we call these the dantians. And then between these dantian fields, there emerges more at the throat and burner and then it creates 7 ultimately. Middle burner. So groups of 7, and you can see, up to, I think people have a general sense of these chakras or dantians everywhere. We talk about dantian. But the center of 7 lies at 4. So that's our middle dantian, our middle elixir field. And so it's really like our heart, or our heart chakra. Chakra translates to a wheel, and that's how we talk about the 6 qi in Chinese medicine. Then in the Nei Jing, it says, for convenience, imagine a wheel. So it actually creates these, it's almost like a conservation of angular momentum, where if you were to impose a body sitting, you would be facing the side, and you'd have dual vortexes here, and so on and so forth, and one above, one below. Now, 4 is the center, like our heart. So when we talk about the heart, when we say something's the heart of something, or it's the heart of the matter, we're talking about it's the center or the core. And that's why in our own experience as human beings, the heart is really has the most torque over our human experience. So fulfillment really occurs as a human being in this existence when the fire element is ignited in the heart. So that's like that pure, perfect moment. Fulfillment occurs at that dimensional level, simply because of the geometric structure. So our whole spirituality, wisdom, divinity, and our physical structure are really supporting this heart. People say, follow your heart. And so when you collapse this image holographically into the center, that creates this double dorji, which is the symbol of our clan. So you can also, I'll talk a little bit about, actually, I can go to the next slide. This is like our energetic anatomy. So this larger, we talked about this torus, but that's superimposed. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But then we have these 7 levels. And since the heart is the center, that's really like our present moment. That's how we feel. When we go up, how we think and our mind, that's really like our future, our thought patterns, the way that we perceive the world, our wisdom, our spirituality. That's the things that are going to draw us forward, make the decisions that we make to the present moment that we're feeling in our heart right now. And then our physical structure reflects, things that just occurred. So down into our hormones, and your hormones are reflecting, you get startled and your cortisol spikes, or you go down to the very center, the core of the nucleus, which would be like the most yin in our DNA. And Sam doesn't know his great grandfather, but he's wearing his ears on his head. Do you know what I mean? So, but also it's a torus flow, so it comes back up. So your DNA can be indicative of certain, people are into the gene keys, but you can look at like if someone has a gene that's more likely for addiction or certain personality traits, and so on and so forth. So this brings us to the idea of the Tai Chi symbol. And here's another physicist who was into some Taoist theory, and it was Niels Bohr. He won a mathematics award, and the society that awarded him, anyone who received this award, they would get to put their family crest on the walls of this place. And so he didn't have one, so he designed his own, and he used the Tai Chi symbol in the center, and he wrote contraria sunt complementa, which means opposites are complementary. He also famously said that The opposite of a false statement is a correct statement. But the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement. But the opposite of a profound truth may also be another profound truth. So that'll tie in a little bit in a second. And so I brought up the heart thing, and it's important because that's what we're going to be using today. We're going to focus on how we can use Taoist numerology in order to do jiu-jitsu on our own emotional experience. It's pretty cool stuff. So, as Sam was discussing, the idea of a Tai Chi symbol as a Taurus. So yes, the Tai Chi symbol, which depicts yin and yang, is widely known, but it's always given to us on two-dimensional sheets of paper. It's artwork on two-dimensional walls or canvases, but it's representing a higher dimensional life. So reality is higher, more than just two dimensions. So what you see here is the topology that it's actually pointing to, which, as he said, is like a donut. So it's got that 0 point at the center, like that. So it's actually not that. Some people say it's like a white fish with a black eye and a black fish with a white eye. Really, that center is like the eye of a hurricane. It's an empty space. It's the emptiness at the center. And that's like within our own structure, that would be what we call our penetrating vessel, which penetrates and connects all of these different dimensions. And so it's not that the eye is black and the eye is white. It's you're looking through the white side at the opposite side, at the black side, and you can see the black, and you're looking through the white side and you can see the black side through the emptiness at the center. So it's so important, and it puts so many things together. I mean, I have Chuangzi, Nei Jing, and Tao Te Ching in front of me, so I'll just open to Tao Te Ching and chapter 4. It is like the eternal void filled with infinite possibilities. Chapter 5, the Tao is like a bellows. It is empty, yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The Tao is called the Great Mother, chapter 6. It is empty, yet inexhaustible. It gives birth to the infinite worlds. So you can see now you have an image to tie all of this, almost poetry together, and that understanding. And so that 0, even in mathematics, 0 is infinity. The only thing that can hold the infinite is that which is boundless. So if I give you, like, if I was a real estate agent and I showed you around, I showed you a 1 million square foot house, just to give the idea, you'd be like, wow, this is a huge house. If I showed you an infinite square foot house, you would say, there's no house here. What are you talking about? Because it's boundless. So that 0 and infinity is actually 1. You could talk about it as the, being empty or being full simultaneously. Empty yourself and you will be full. Some examples in nature, just to show you how much this pops up. We have the apple, which is a torus. I like this example because it's a torus shape, but also at the center, when you cut an apple, you get this pentagon with 5 seeds. And this is more into the Yun Qi, which we don't have a lot of enough time to get into, but the 6 Qi is like the pure conscious energy, which becomes the 5 elements of physical form. So yin and yang of that gives us 12 and 10. Like stems and branches. And it's also why, the six chi we talk about is like rhythms and timing. So time is best measured in Dozenal, like a clock is base 12, and all of our metric units, distance, weight, is best measured in decimal, base 10. Again, a tornado, which is, it's important to remember that this is also moving. So this torus is moving and rotating down, up, and around. So it's really like if you've done the teacup qigong, where you have to rotate around. That's the concept that we're kind of getting to. You see it in magnetic fields. So really what it's getting to is, since we have this structure manifesting in all of our light, every photon is emerging from one of these torus structures in physics. Reality itself always manifests in explicit opposites, which makes an implicit whole. So that's why we have this yin and yang duality. So some examples of the torus in mathematics. You can think about the torus, really, it's used as a matrix of transformation. So I can have higher dimensional units and I can project them down into a lower dimensional space. And that's really what we're talking about in Taoism. When people would ask Master Sung, what is Taoism? How do you define Taoism? He would say, Taoism is multidimensional math. And you look at like the 81, the 7, it's like all these calculations about how consciousness comes into form in this hierarchical structure. So in physics, all matter particles emerge from spinors. So it's like every particle emerges from this higher dimensional. This one really is like the teacup qigong, because you need to rotate 720 degrees to get back to the beginning. But it's fascinating to see that it's not just in Taoism, that it's in all of our understandings of reality from a modern perspective. Quaternionic projection, I won't get too much into that actually, but it's just, again, even on your computer screen, you can there's these, you can have 4-dimensional matrices, and it uses this topology in order to quickly show you rotations on multiple axes simultaneously. Another interesting part about the torus is that it's the only self-sustaining motion in a medium. So it's almost like the most common sense way for the universe to order itself. So getting back again to the Chongmai, which is almost like our own personal cosmic thunder at the center. This really, we have from this Taoist understanding an explanation for the placebo effect. Not just an explanation, but something that's really fundamental to our understanding is that following this torus flow from subtler dimensions, we get into denser physical form, and then the form informs the energy. So I often give the example, if you just imagine your favorite dessert and you really get into that practice, like the last time that you ate it, all of a sudden your amylase starts to trigger your salivating, your emotional state might change, your insulin will spike, your blood glucose will drop. And if you hold these things for long enough, you can even affect your epigenetics or repeat them over and over. So there's really fascinating studies of, like, in the New York Times, there was a case of a guy who had formerly multiple personality disorder. I think they call it dissociative identity disorder now, who had, I think it was 13 personalities, and 12 of them were terribly allergic to oranges, but one loved orange juice and would just drink it nonstop. So it shows you your your body is your subconscious mind, and it's just accommodating your style. You could think of it like that. There's also the cases of people with, again, dissociative identity disorder, and some of the personalities will be type 2 diabetic, while other ones have perfectly normal insulin sensitivity. I have some more quotes. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there's a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. That's from Nikola Tesla. When there is no more separation between this and that, it is called the still point of the Tao. At the still point in the center of the circle, one can see the infinite in all things. Again, the Chongmai is just the central trunk. There's also the branches of each of the dantians, and there's a center to each of those. And then they branch out to 6 Qi, and then bear fruit with the 5 elements. So speaking of 5 elements, the 5 elements, that geometry is actually a tetrahedron. So this is what the Dohan sect teaches. And again, when you look at the elements, what's called the cosmological representation of the 5 elements, you get this chart to the right with Earth at the center. So all of our very experiences of life on this physical plane can be summarized into the 5 elements. Like, for instance, we have the 4 seasons, and then Earth is like the time in transition between them. You can apply it to cooking with 5 flavors, 5 emotions, our organs, our tissues, everything. Again, it's like the source code of life. But it's important to remember that the Earth is the center. In Chinese medicine schools, often they'll show just the pentagon version, which we pull out the Earth element in order to show the control cycle, which kind of highlights how the 6 Qi unfolds into 5 elements. But really, you should understand it within this context of the tetrahedron, with the 4 vertices being these fire, metal, water, and spring, and wood. I mixed up wood and spring, but the Earth being the center of it. So we can give the example of cooking, for instance. Earth is sweet, and then we have all of these other flavors. So if you think about like what flavors go together, you can see like bittersweet, sweet and spicy, sweet and savory, sweet and sour, but you don't hear like sour, bitter, bitter, spicy. They don't pair as much. So that really, the earth element ties it together. You can think about like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So the earth element, each of our organs not just has a physiological function, but it also has our energetic and emotional function to it. So everyone knows the heart is like, you know, love and joy. And maybe you know that the liver can be like anger. But the earth element is the spleen and stomach, which is all about not just processing our food, but processing our life and creating narratives. And it helps you to digest all of these really sharp, strong emotional experiences and tie it together. So we all know that there's a certain amount of processing that we do with our life. That's the earth element. So again, the 5 elements is contained within the greater Tai Chi ball, which has the 6 Qi. So it has to be governed also by these laws of yin and yang. So in Chinese medicine school, they'll give you just one emotion, but it's important to remember this duality that has to express itself. So from the Nei Jing, the 5 elemental phases and yin and yang are a governing law of the universe. This law exposes the polarities of everything. So this was really like mind blowing to me when, and just you recognize it as so true. These Taoist truths, they should be like, when you hear it, it should be almost like, man, if I just thought about this like 2 more minutes, I would have gotten it. It's like just so pure and true. So the heart really to us is, it's really a sadness detector. So love and heartbreak really go together. When you think about your most tender moments in your life, maybe like the birth of a child or getting married, you feel this heartbreak at the same time that you feel this love. Why do we cry at the happiest moments in our life? And that's because they go together. So it's really like the heartbreak that you can hold is the measure of your love. It's like the roots to the branches. Again, you can think about worry and contentment for the earth element, grief, and also letting go, inhale and exhale, the sobriety, clear thinking of metal. The kidneys are the water element. So the kidneys are like a fear detector, the adrenal glands being the kidney yang, which rest on top of the kidneys. So any fear that you have, you'll dump your adrenal glands. And it's really, like love songs are all sad tones. Adventure movies are like deep, ominous bass tones. So like the no fear, no excitement, no adventure. Sometimes I've given a lot of talks, but I still feel like, a little bit of adrenaline before I get going. And I frame it, oh, I'm excited. And so you need to alchemize. This is a way that you can alchemize these feelings in you. So if you don't run from any negative feelings, because you're closer to the yang aspect than you know. So anger and creativity of wood, for instance, like the liver stores the blood, and the blood has two aspects, the red blood cells and the white blood cells, which is like our nutritive aspect and also our killing aspect. Or the greatest times of technological advancements are during times of war. Or I think of like Beethoven, like dun, 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 dun. Creative, but also a little aggressive in there too. An Alan Watts quote. I love Alan Watts. Duality is always secretly unity. Underneath opposition, there is love. Underneath duality, there is unity. Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle. So you see, here's that weaving principle, that things hold together by over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And that creates a stuff. It creates a fabric. It creates clothing. It creates shelter. It creates what we call matter. And really he was onto something, because that's how the whole 5 elements in 6 chi, it really is over, under, over. That's the whole stems and branches, which manifests as all as of life, like the whole flow of our meridians goes from Tai Yin, Yang Ming, Tai Yin, and so on and so forth. It goes, yin, yang, yin, yin. Anyways. So looking at the control cycle, this is where we can actually, first I'll start with the generating cycle, the way that it naturally progresses in time, the 5 elements. So water is like winter, wood is like spring, and fire is like summer, metal is like fall, earth is everything in between. So it naturally flows this way through time. So if you look at your own emotional experiences, what happens when you startle someone? My sister loves to scare people. What happens when someone gets startled? You get spooked. From that fear springs anger. So like one of the first reactions when someone gets startled, oh, they scream at you, you know, and, you know, you see someone, if they're mad enough, eventually, once that breaks, they'll move into tears soon after, and so on and so forth. So you see this in our own emotional aspects. Or if you're driving sometimes and someone cuts you off, you get startled and then you get really pissed. Or even I like to say, if you're driving and you make a mistake but you don't realize it, someone honks at you, and then you get pissed at the other person even though you were in the wrong, because you get spooked into anger. So being aware of these cycles, you can start to develop Dao Guan. You realize these patterns emotionally that you've been doing over and over. And that helps. Dao Guan is like your Taoist view. You see things less personally, even your own emotional experience. And so it has less grip over you. So we can talk a little bit about the control cycle. And for instance, how do we get over a bunch of resentment, like a bunch of anger that we have? And so, for instance, if you're in your spring element in a negative position and you're trying to get back into the fire of the heart that we talked about is like our full bloom, full expression, summertime, the fulfillment in life, then if you get a call like, oh, this person you were really close to just died, then it quickly dries up your anger. You think, oh, geez, I should really, it puts things in perspective. It controls that anger. Or if you're, for instance, you've built your whole life around a relationship and suddenly it falls apart. And often you'll see it. It's important to understand as a practitioner what insulin is doing and blood glucose. And there's a lot of things downstream of that. But often people won't be able to eat afterwards. They have no appetite and their earth element is really wrecked. You've built your life around this relationship. And so that will control the water element. So your adrenal glands won't fire. So after a breakup is a great time to do things that you're afraid of. You already want to die, so you don't have your adrenal glands won't fire. So you can use this control cycle in all these different ways. I had someone going through a very big heartbreak. It wasn't as much involved with the earth element. And I took them nonstop to scary movies in order to shock their system back. It didn't fix anything. I mean, life obviously isn't just a game of rock, paper, shoot, where you can control it with this and that. There has to be the same levels in order to control it. But it's enough to get their head above water for a second and then come back to it, because you can't push the boat from inside the boat. Sometimes you need someone who's out of it or to get out of it for a second. Let's see, I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Okay, so now we will get into what I've been interested in lately, which is Daoist numerology in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which originally was Jiu-Jitsu, came from Japan. So I use this term Sankaku, which translates to triangle, and the 6 chi. So basically, we're going to be talking about triangles and toruses in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And excuse my face in the image to the right. It ain't pretty, but it's honest work. So in both of these images, I have essentially the same geometry of my arms, where I create a triangle in different locations in order to do what's called an Americana submission on the bottom left and a coat hanger in the right. And so all of the ways in which you connect to an opponent and submit them is always triangles. Maybe you've heard of a triangle choke. So it's a sankaku, and then I think it's like jime, or I'm not sure what the actual choke, but sankaku. An entanglement with the legs inside sankaku, outside sankaku. You make the same. This is a rear naked choke. So you make the triangle here. You make that same shape with your legs and can choke them and choke their neck. So really, it's the same shape. It's just they get different names because are you using your arms or your legs, and which limb are you attacking? And then it's just positional differences. So you have a triangle, you have an inverted triangle, reverse triangle, etc. So think when you connect and you're in a controlling position, you're making these triangular forms. And so even an arm bar and a leg and a knee bar, you latch on to you create a triangle with your knees and your arms, and then your hips or your dantian is like the middle angle, which goes from acute to obtuse, eventually hyperextending their joint in order to injure them. So getting into the torus has that same flow. Now, if you want to transition from another position into another, there's all kinds of toruses in which you can do this. So like a rolling back take or a samurai roll. First, you connect your legs like a triangle. I was hoping to demonstrate some of these, but my wife couldn't make it. She hates when I do jiu-jitsu on her anyway. So uh, you just look up some of these, like a samurai roll, Brazilian BJJ, and it'll pop right up, and you'll see you roll. You're in this position that doesn't look like a threat at all, but connecting your legs with this triangle, and then you roll your head over, and your spine becomes like the central axis, and then the bottom twists, and suddenly you can take the back of your opponent, which is a very advantageous place to be. Next, we divide this Taiji ball into 6 chi. So we have 3 yin and 3 yang. This pattern emerges everywhere, like we talked about. So even here, would be like on the channels of our arms. So if I have my hands out face up, the left image would be like my left hand, and Taiyang would be on the bottom, Shaoyin would be on top. And these opposing forces are really what makes the physical matter, the physical chi. It's almost like wave particle duality in physics, that it exists as this pure wave, 6 chi, until it becomes physical form, 5 elements. So in martial arts, we even study this in the Dohan, where when your arm is in, that's like Shaoyang. You have the greatest potential energy, you have the greatest torque. Torque is really like the power of spinning. Halfway extended, you have the greatest force, like Yang Ming. And full extension is Tai Yang, old Yang, great Yang. But if someone's trying to punch you, it is very difficult. You can try it on your own self to move a hand when it's in close to the body. When it's fully extended, it's very easy to push it out of the way. You can feel that immediately if you want to try it at all. So in jiu-jitsu, when you're facing a stronger opponent, you always want to keep your frames in. That's what they say, they're frames. And that will give you the greatest leverage, the greatest strength, just positionally over a stronger opponent. If you're fully extended, you can easily be, moved from your position. Another thing that's really great is when you take someone's back in jiu-jitsu, often you're going for a rear naked choke. They'll be trying to defend the choke with their arm. So if I grab a wrist, yeah, I can move it a little bit, but you don't have much leverage. So in the same way, anatomically, not just posture wise, if you grab the Taiyang meridian, you can have much more control over the whole entire uh, limb. So if I grab at the pinky and rotate up and back, you've gained all of the strength of their arms been compromised. So you go against the rotation of the six chi. So you move it back this way and you'll have much more control. And if you were to try this, you would see just how effective this is. And I do this all the time with people who are, trained killers, and they don't even, most of them don't even know that I'm into Taoism and stuff. So this is really effective stuff in live roles. That's pretty much what I got for today. References, I used some quotes from the Yellow Emperor's Classic. And then this is my logo I made with ceremony, and it's a stereographic projection of a tetrahedron from a higher dimensional torus. So, and it's got the earth element in the center, and then the number of lines. There's a bunch of stuff encoded into that. So I really like it. Questions?
Amazing. Thank you, Rory. So as I mentioned to the folks earlier, write your questions in the chat. We'll take a moment to kind of get a few in, and we'll start to ask Rory. I think I, for one, need a moment to digest some of that. I finally put into pictures a lot of things that I'm like, we just learned this as words.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, this is so much easier to understand some of these higher level concepts when you can see them and actually even move your hand and feel them. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's
great to have the image too, because you can always go back to it, manipulate it in your mind, and you can get fresh new insights from just referencing the structure itself. That's really one of the powers of geometry.
Yeah, no, one thing I'm going to say before I get into the first question is it reminds me of the gait cycle and rotation during the gait cycle, running, jumping, walking, doesn't matter, all gait. We tend to move in this pattern towards the inside, towards pronation when we go to run. So even though we're running in a straight line, our legs are moving forward, we're always moving in this torus shape as we go, because we're moving from this pinky side edge towards the big toe, towards the strong part of the foot, this yin part of the foot, this part that's actually can take force. And you look at your foot and you think, where do I put my force? Okay, the big bone on the inside versus the little pinky toe. And that's exactly a torus, and that explains actually why we're so strong, and athletes that are generally pretty gifted at running and jumping tend to take advantage of that torque quite a bit, and that toric sort of flow in motion. So it's a cool parallel between, I never thought about it in terms of a torus or a triangle, but it's the exact same mechanics that you're talking about within jiu-jitsu as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Or I'm thinking of a kudu horn. Have you seen a kudu horn that has a perfect golden spiral, and then it has a yang side and a yin side, like a rough and then a smooth side? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into a couple questions here. Just for one private message. Yes, these sessions are being recorded. So if you missed the first part, you will be able to go on the Daoist Gate YouTube and access it later. Linda is asking, are the symbols 1 through 7 similar in our DNA?
The symbols 1 through, could you clarify? I'm not certain on.
Yeah,
1
maybe
through
Linda,
7.
you could follow up with a message, because I'm not gonna know.
I could talk a little bit about DNA.
I'm curious. We'll
So yeah, let's just talk about numerology and DNA. This is what I know about. So it's a double spiral. Again, it's a yeah, exactly. So the numerology it's really like when you break down the, like, why do we have 64 hexagrams in the I Ching? Because we have 6 bars and you can do binary operations on each of them. But why 6 bars? And we look at it, and there's a whole lost art of permutations that we have as the yin or yang interactions between the 7 levels. So if I have 7 islands, I need 6 bridges to get between them. And so this is, on each plane, this is like the very DNA of life, the 64 hexagrams. And so we also have 64 codons of DNA. And at each of those levels, we have a dual Tai Chi, which has 6 and 5 and 6 and 5, and a yin goes with yin and yang goes with yang. So then you get 60 combinations. And so, but to add the stems and branches together, you get 10 and 12, which gives you 22. So you have 64 codons, which code for 22 amino acids. And if you look at the dual, like the chemical structure of the nucleotides themselves, it's a hexagonal and pentagonal pairings. So dual hexagonal and pentagonal pairings as it rotates up all along. And this is really fascinating. I haven't gone too far in my understanding of this, but I know that it's totally usable. Master Sung, my teacher, also worked with Dana Farber back in the day. So if you Google him, you can find like the original lung cancer biomarker patents from decades ago. And so he told me the same thing. Like he didn't tell anyone. It was just that he was a Taoist. He was just Dr. Baek. He's also a medical doctor. So it's been great to study and learn Taoism in a modern context too.
Awesome. Dia's asking, in Neidan meditation, do you suggest to visualize the torus circles we saw on the slides? Following up, because I used to visualize in activating the daimai, the spiral going from down to up and then down again.
Yeah, I think that there's like you can do we hold a certain posture that automatically does it for you. So you don't have to implement your brain. And then eventually it's just like in jiu-jitsu. Now the sequence in my mind and I can go and do it without ever having done it before. When I first started jiu-jitsu, there's no way I can like actually do jiu-jitsu in my mind. So yeah, I would say you can if your mind is you find yourself so cluttered with other random thoughts, random mental diarrhea, then something like a visualization might be helpful to bring your attention into this moment. But ultimately, it's your own nature. So once you connect to that Chong Mai force, it's like there's so much life within you that you can, what else would you pay attention to? So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I can speak on my personal experience because again, that's one of the reasons why I was like, oh, this guy really knows something when you were talking about the torus, because it shows up in certain stages of meditation and certain postures that and I think it's when it's a spontaneous experience, it's perhaps very different than a visualized or created experience. To feel, it's like picturing a tree in your head versus walking outside into the woods, right?
Yeah. Alan Watts used to say, you can't trip over a line of latitude.
Yeah, that's a good quote. That's great. Yeah, Rosie's asking in the chat, this tetrahedron, can you explain further why Earth is positioned in the center of the tetrahedron and what season it represents, if any?
Sure. So we talk about like the transitional times like Indian summer, or basically it's everything in between. So you have your four vertices, and then the volume in the center is that earth element. So it's it gives body to the rest of it. So it fills up the space in between. So it's more like, I don't want to say transition, in the course of time could about it like that, but it's more it holds everything together. It's like the glue between them.
Yeah, the way that I learned it from a classical Japanese acupuncturist was Earth in seasons was representing the transition between the seasons. And I think that
Yeah.
will align with the Earth in the center is the seasons, in Chinese medicine or classical, Chinese tradition, the seasons are marked instead of in the West where we have the solstice beginning the season, it's 6 weeks before the solstice and 6 weeks after. And so like the in-between times between those were like dominated by the earth element because none of the specific other four elements were dominant. And those are times where people are a little more vulnerable to being sick and other things like that because of that transitional nature. And you said the earth element is like there's a transition, but the earth's job is to hold it together, not necessarily be the transition, correct? Like the earth is the glue in the middle.
Yeah, it's like Gansao in a formula. It like
Yeah.
ties everything together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah, yeah. Good pull together. Cool. So we have some thanks coming in from the chat. I think, yeah, this is a recording for the folks that have asked. This is going to be a recording on YouTube. I know that I'm going to look back through it because there's some images I want to see again, and there are some good quotes here that I might I might pull down. I'll quote you, Rory, but yeah,
All
some
right.
of the things you said in this, I'm like, wow, that should be written on a wall somewhere. Like these are really important things here. One quote I wanna pull up again because I was like, the heartbreak you can hold is the measure of your love. Like we didn't expect, so much emotion in, in this talk, but that's a beautiful one amongst other things. As well as the lesson of don't run from the negative feelings because you're closer to the positive aspects, the flip side of those feelings than you really know. There's some great wisdom in that. So thank you, Rory, for being here. And we're gonna continue this conference at what is it? 1 p.m. Eastern. Let me double check that that's absolutely true. Um, and we're going to get back to it with talking from Ross Rosen about integrating Taoist medicine with Chinese medicine, and Yuhua Meng with some astrology as we transition from the dragon year to the snake of the upcoming year. And so, yes, that is 1 p.m. Eastern. And thank you, Rory, for this talk.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Master. Thank you all so much.
Yeah. Thank you, and we'll see you again at 1. Enjoy your lunch or whatever meal or whatever time you have in the world.